First and foremost, this may embarrass one of your students. Do you guys know you have one of the top fiddlists in the entire world in your class?
Yeah, the top
Oh, you know? Okay. I just wanted to make sure everyone knew. That was it.
Could you repeat what you said? The top what?
Fiddlist in the world.
Oh.
In the world, not just the United States, in the world.
He's seen us rehearse.
It's the truth, though. Okay, so when Dr. Benford Whiting spoke to me, I'll tell you how our conversation started off, and maybe that'll open it up to some questions, which I prefer rather than me just standing up here and talking the entire time. I like to field questions because I think that really broadens the experience for you all in understanding how other students think, as well as how you all are thinking about things and how things are running through your head with regards to life, and how we look at this negotiation and navigation process of minorities and non-minorities in different populations. And I don't want to minimize it or simply collapse it to just black and white, or I don't want to do that. But our conversation started out where she was inviting me to the class, and we just got on the topic about education. Something that, what's your name?
Brianna.
Brianna just shared with you all. And I shared with her, I said, I grew up in Washington, D.C., inner city Washington, D.C., not Maryland, not Virginia. I was born in Southeast Washington, D.C., grew up in Northwest Washington, D.C. before it got gentrified. Okay, so now when I tell people I'm from Northwest Washington, D.C., they're like, holy cow, your family must be really rich. I'm like, no, it was not like that when I was a kid there. So I shared with her that you will see a lot of times you'll see upper middle class families, if there's any sort of trial, if there's any sort of obstacle or a tough day for their kid in a school that has a strong minority base, they automatically pull them out. And you'll see this happen. You'll see this educational or academic flight occur throughout schools. So I shared with her that I said it's always a travesty because people typically don't think in the larger picture. They don't think, okay, what's best for all of society? Is it best for all of society for me to pull Johnny or Susie out and just have them go to an exclusively private white school? Or is it more beneficial that with all the education and my experience as a parent who's had an opportunity to go to an elite school, provide that, and then other kids know what to strive for? And I shared with her my personal experience as a kid. There was this kid named Carlton Ingram, and we were very good friends. And even though I grew up in a poor neighborhood, I was sent to really nice schools. And I discovered how to read in cursive, how to actually do a signature, because third graders were doing that. The majority of them were Jewish. I went to a really heavy Jewish school, Jewish and Asian school. But I had never been exposed to those things in my neighborhood. And I thought it was beneficial for me to understand that type of life and what it could offer, or what I could strive for. Whereas if that had not occurred, and let's say there was a bad day at school, which there was, Carlton and I got in a fight one day. His mom didn't pull him out. But what if she did? Or what if all the parents did that? I would have been disadvantaged. Only because I then would have just been in school with just the kids that I went to my neighborhood with, who weren't up to any good, and then back to school again, and it's just a horrible cycle. So I said, what if people just thought about, well, what's best for the community? And I gave an example about a stop sign. I said, when we put stop signs up, I don't think anyone's thinking about a black kid, a Latin kid, an Asian kid, a Jewish kid, a white kid. They're just, no, this is what's best for the neighborhood. We have to have this here for overall safety for everyone. So if we could think more along those lines as global thinkers in this world, and I'm talking about you all and as leaders, how much more advantaged would our societies be? Because I don't think about that type of reform measure being something that is only exclusive to a single group. It benefits everyone, and everyone abides by that rule. And I thought about that, well, what if parents just kept their kids in those schools, worked with the PTA, continue to make better reform measures in schools rather than simply saying, no, I'm just gonna pull my kid out. He or she's struggling a little bit. I don't like her or him being here, so I'm just gonna put him where I believe they'll gain a greater advantage. And I argue that you're taking the advantage away from them, because then they won't know how to navigate in society without that experience. Something more recent, and I hope this doesn't, I'm going to keep it as vanilla as I can. I was just sharing with my students as we look at the temple restrictions and priesthood that had to deal with official declaration 2 in blacks. I was sharing with my students, I said, everyone kind of looks at it in a different way than I see it. And I said, everyone's always looking for this answer or something that should happen. And I say, you know what? I look at it this way. I said, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints should be so happy that black people are now members. It should be so happy. Just go through time with me. Let's say the church leadership never lifted the policy, and it's 2018. Do you think you would have 17 million members in your church? Do you think you would have 1 million members in your church? Do you think maybe you'd have 2,000 to 5,000 in some little enclave in Utah? Probably, right? I think about survivability, right? And again, I'm just looking at it from a temporal standpoint. Like, would you even be sitting here at BYU had the church held on to that all the way through 2018? Right? Had you ever even thought about it that way before? Okay. And that's what I'm saying. When you're only in a homogeneous environment, you don't get my perspective. So you never take the time to even think about that. You're never around a person who thinks that way, thinks differently. Because I know a lot of people scoff when they hear the words diversity and inclusion, but that's it. When you open something up for everyone, you're going to get the talent. Trust me, it will show up. But you can't put obstacles in the way. And so that was just kind of how we started that conversation. All right. I'd like to open it up for questions or comments. Don't be quiet on me because it's Monday. I just taught 2 classes and no one wanted to talk. And Dr. Banford Whiting promised me that you all were a talkative bunch. What's your name? Just tell me your name when you...
Yeah, no worries. I'm Kristen.
Okay, Kristen.
So how did you... I guess I'm curious more about your story. How did you go from Washington, D.C. to being a professor at BYU? Because I served in Philadelphia in those inner city areas, and I'm really curious at how that happened, because that was not the typical that I saw.
My parents barely graduated high school. It's a long story. I'm not going to... It takes a few class periods for that to happen.
Okay.
Barely graduated high school. However, my father really emphasized education, and he only emphasized it with a heavy hand. I guess because those were just the only models that he knew going to Catholic schools. It was just, I know A's are important. We learn this in the social construct that's what helps you, and that's this measurement of academic achievement and to a certain extent intellect. Trust me, the first time I got all A's was, I think, my second year in graduate school. It was the first time I ever had a 4.0. And my goal was just, all I want to do is get a 4.0 in a fall semester once. That was the only goal I ever had. Can I just get a 4.0 in a fall semester once? And it only happened once. I don't think I ever got a 4.0 after that either. And so he really stressed that. And I didn't really, school was boring to me. And this is going to sound really condescending when I say it just seemed really slow paced to me. Like, it just really seemed slow. I was just bored. I didn't feel as if I was really learning a whole lot. And then something critical happened. We moved. after my sophomore year, and we moved to an all-black neighborhood. And when I went to the school, I showed up, and in high school where I grew up, you needed 20 credits to graduate. So I show up to the school, I already had 20 credits coming into the school, and so when I showed, they're like, you need 20 credits to graduate. My mom and I are sitting there, I'm 15 years old, going to my junior year, and she's like, what? And they're like, well, he's already met all the requirements for our school. And so I look at Mom, as I told you, I was obnoxious. I still am, but not as bad. And she was like, you are not going to be at home all day by yourself at 15 years old. And they had to come up with a new schedule for me. I had to go to school at 6 a.m. to take these classes where we were on a teleconference, and it was with other schools for just students who, I'm not calling myself smart, but that's just what they put me in. And so I had to take classes that way, and then I went to a regular curriculum for that school because they're like, you have to be here. You're going to have double the credits of everyone else, but my mom was just like, no, you're just going to school. And I had a rude awakening to the education system in the United States. So I graduated high school with a 10th grade level education. Getting out of the neighborhood, my only way out was either dead or the military or rich parents. So 2 didn't happen, 1 did, and I just went straight. As soon as I was old enough, so you could do this thing called a delayed entry program. You're like 15 years old and like almost 16, where you can sign. And as soon as I was eligible, I signed. And then as soon as I turned 17, I went straight in the military. And that was what happened because I knew I could get the GI Bill. I knew my parents couldn't afford school. So that was the route I had to take in order to be able to go to college. I mean, I don't think I'd ever met anyone who had gone to college, not graduated from college, gone to college until I was 19, almost 20. I just met someone who had gone to college, and then I met people who actually graduated from college. So I didn't even know what that process was like. But that was how I got out. To becoming a college professor, that's a different story. That was just the war started. I went to BYU. September 11th happened. I had 2 semesters left in college, and I couldn't wait for school to be over because it was like, I gotta get out of here and help the country. And so that was how I was feeling at that time. And then I got in, just was a long, a lot of people really look at it and think, oh, you're so brave and I'm like, no, I just really felt that it was something I needed to. I'm leaving a lot of details out. But after, a lot of combat deployments, multiple, I was exhausted physically and just mentally, and just knew I wanted a change. And I had some professors, some mentors here back at BYU who had always tried to push me to get a PhD. I wasn't interested in it. And then I didn't think I was smart enough. Again, didn't have the grades. Remember that. Didn't have the grades most people had. So they were like, no, you really can do this. I was like, that's for smart people. I'm sure you may have thought that too. Like when somebody pushed you, yeah, you're just like, that's for smart people, not me. Even now in my job, I'm still thinking I'm like on the low end. I'm like, how's everyone still so smart, right? So I said, let me just apply to 2 schools. And so I was going on my 3rd tour to Iraq, and I was like, let me just apply. And I got into every graduate program. I was like, whoa. I was like, my grades weren't that great. I was like, what happened? So that gave me a little bit of confidence, not a lot, just a little bit. I was like, okay, calm down, Cameron. It's just a couple schools. And I had to make a decision on what I was going to do, and I went and decided to get out, go in the reserves, and then I actually started graduate school while I was on active duty. And went and did a master's degree. I thought I was going to stay at that school, Texas A&M, for the entire time. And I had done enough, I guess, to impress some of the faculty. Said you need to go to a more quality school. And so I didn't want to. I was like, I don't want to apply. Like applying to graduate school, oh my goodness. It not stressful. It's so much. And it's expensive too. You're talking roughly $700 out of your pocket just for application fees and stuff, and I only applied to 6 schools. And so it's just a lot. It's taxing. It's emotional because the whole time you don't think you're good enough, even though you're already in a graduate program. You're like, but I'm not good enough for those. And so there's always this self-doubt, but I work through it. I'm like, listen, man, people are telling you to do this, trust them. And so that's what happened. As far as BYU went, I started getting recruited after the first year of my PhD program. And so someone contacted me from BYU. They're like, hey, we know you're working on your PhD, so-and-so told us, we want you to consider coming here. And that was it. Okay, I was getting ready to start asking you all questions.
Oh, you can do that too.
Okay. Yes.
My name's Kelsey, and I was just thinking, because this class has really kind of challenged my perspective of how to view myself or my comfortability and whatnot. I was just wondering, because I think where we live especially, it's very much a majority group, right? As far as ethnicity goes, it's a lot of Caucasian going around, just a lot of white people. But I guess it's not a bubble here. There's a whole world out there, right? And so I guess how can people as a whole be better about not being colorblind just because that's what they're used to, or just being more comfortable in being able to see things from different perspectives, like you mentioned that being in class.
I think you'll hear this a lot, but I'll add a few things to it. You need to be comfortable with uncomfortable conversations. No, I see BYU students always nodding this, but they're not. They're not. But trust me, I know my student evaluations tell me this. And this is me educating students. They're like, well, we want to change. Okay, here's the history, here are the facts, here's the evidence. What are you going to do with it? And I believe what needs to happen is just accept that you're the beneficiary of a system based on inequality. You are the benefactors of white supremacy. You are the benefactors of bigotry. You just are. That is a fact. It's not something to run away from. It is not something to cower at or get defensive. So many students get so defensive. And I'm like, no, I'm trying to explain this to you. I've already taught you the history, and you're telling me you can't see that at all. So most institutions are designed that way. Even in 2018, they just are. And so this innocence that many Caucasians have about where they are and what they fight for just needs to be abandoned. And just accept, all right, this is what I've benefited from. Now that I've benefited from it, what levers can I pull on to at least flatten this process somewhat? I don't know if we can ever get all the wrinkles out, and I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. But where do I start? And I don't know where that is for you. Some of the things that I've discussed with some of my students, and as I said, for some people, again, I don't know where I completely stand with this, but if you really do want to change, let's start evaluating, well, how did these buildings get here? I'm talking about any institution, not Brigham Young University. How did these buildings get here? Whose names are going on them? Why are we building these statues here? And if you want to change those names, that's fine. Because what you have to do is you have to erase that. But people will say, well, that's part of our history. Yes, but it's still debilitating an entire demographic. And I think when we can look at that, and you just have to, one of the contested figures who I admire for his political mind and philosophy is Woodrow Wilson, but at the same time, a staunch racist bigot, right? He alone in 1915 hurt blacks in the federal government. And blacks still have not recovered from that in over 100 years. They still haven't recovered from that. And that was a single man making one single act. There has not existed a group of people who can overcome his one single act over 100 years ago. So I would just start with that, just abandoning this innocence about, well, I didn't do it, but you are a byproduct of that system. Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned that where you grew up, the only way to get out was the military, rich parents, or something else.
Dead.
Or
That's
dead,
it.
right? And kind of just where you are now, looking at similar neighborhoods maybe, what would you say needs to change to be able to help other people who experience like this sense of like you're stuck, you know, like how do I get out? Like what changes would you make to help somebody who's stuck like that?
Perfect question, which leads to her comment, right? I see a lot of students who have means. They go, I'm going to go on a humanitarian mission to Mexico or somewhere to help build houses and schools. No, go to Southside Chicago. Fix the economic gap there. Like, you really want to invest in your education. You went to college for it. These people don't have it. Take all that talent you have and fix it. Just start. Start there. I don't want you to send me pictures. I just want to see results. Go to Ferguson, Missouri and talk about legislation there. Instead of just, hey, I think it's cool. We're just going to go to Capitol Hill and talk about DACA. And oh, that was just really cool to do. No, don't take your camera, don't take your phone, don't post pictures on your social media. Just go there and work. If you want to impress me, go do that. That's what I challenged students when I was talking with Jake Rue during one of his presentations. That will demonstrate you are very serious about the changes you'd like to see. Go to these places. Go to Baltimore and fix the effects of redlining. Go someplace and fix the effects of police brutality. Like, if you really want to show me something, do that. And I think that would at least push a sea change of what could happen, because you have the knowledge base, you have the backing. Like, most of you can get into doors I will never be able to get into, even though I have a PhD. I still can't get into doors you all can get into. I just can't. And even what's worse, right? Right, as women, right? As girls in here, right? You can't even get into doors your male counterparts can, even though you may have more education than them. Am I right? So it's just, those are the types of things that need to change. And so, can I use this real quick?
If it works, I'm sorry. I'm still
No,
waiting
just
for my
this.
Oh, for sure.
Oh, yeah.
They're a little weak sometimes.
Okay,
Hopefully
that's
that
fine.
was.
So what you have in our nation, I share this with my students, is you have legislation, right? Then you have a history. What do we do with history, right? We teach it, right? Then you have attitudes. I'm going to film so I can't mess up. And then you have perceptions, right? Do any of these you feel every day on campus or in your life? So we can look at 1964, 1965, landmark legislation that dealt with civil rights and voting rights. So that took care of some things. However, before all of that, people in the United States were being taught what about women and minorities? Really, ladies? What?
Oh, what were we being taught?
Yeah, what were we being taught? Women should, go ahead,
Second
Laura.
class citizens.
Right, exactly. Women included. Okay, so today we kind of know this helped open the door. We're still struggling with this, right? Even in communities today. But here's where the two biggest are these, right? These attitudes and perceptions. I was going through spring training with Dr. Banford Whiting, and they actually shared with us that there was a student, a male student, that on a female teacher's evaluation, he wrote, "You're taking the spot of a man. You should be at home rearing your family." This was a 2017 student evaluation. So it's tough for me to get rid of those attitudes, right? So with those attitudes come perceptions, which are what? Should I take a female seriously? Or a minority seriously? And again, all these are attached. And so when you're up against that, it's really difficult to make headroom. Yes, sir.
What single thing about your personality has gotten you the most mileage in life?
I don't know. I like to think it's too charm and good looks, but you know. It's just good. When I was a kid, what's your name? Matt. I'll tell you. That's my dad's name. I'll tell you the truth. What happened to me, and this is what I've seen. There was always someone who saw something in me who, like, this guy's special, this guy's different. I don't know if that's true, but at least people would say that to me. And I saw it, the first time I really started understanding it is when I was about 8 years old. Something happened, I missed school, and the principal from the school drove to my neighborhood and found me. She drove me to school. I had never ever seen a white person in my neighborhood. Her name is Miss Pinckney Murray. I have no idea where she is today. But she drove and picked me up. And she was talking to me and my shoe was gone. I got beat up by some kids. Her shoe I had one shoe on. I was like, please don't tell my parents. She's like, I'm not. She came and picked me up. I had never had anyone do that for me in my life up to that point. I mean, 8 years old. Right? When I was 11, I played football. And it's interesting you asked this question because I was doing laundry last night and I had the picture when I was 11 with my team, and I was thinking about that. Everybody got a position assigned to them before the season started. And I didn't. I was the last player on the team that didn't have a position. And I knew I was the best athlete and the smartest athlete on the team, and I didn't have a position. Never complained. I never complained about it. I think finally I just went up to coach and like, we have a game tomorrow. Are you gonna let me know what I'm playing? Am I even on the team? So I was worried. And I said, because if I'm not, it's okay. I'll just go home. I don't want to get in the way. And that was at 11 years old. Can you believe that? I look back at amazement and was like, where's that guy still at? And he said, you're going to be our leader. You're going to be our quarterback. And I was like, what is that? And what am I supposed to do? And he was like, you're a natural at this. I had no idea. I just would throw a football just for fun. I got appendicitis halfway through the season. We were 6-0. I had to have my appendix taken out. I missed the rest of the season. We lost 4 straight games. So I go to the award ceremony, and I sit down, and I'm there for my teammates. That's it. I just came there for my teammates, and that was it. And I was so happy for everyone. I thought this guy named Darren was our MVP. He was awesome. He was fast. He was our running back. He just did an excellent job. And I remember sitting down, and there was one trophy left, the MVP trophy, and it was, when I was that age, it looked huge. I mean, it's probably this big. And I'm just sitting there with my parents, and they're like, and our MVP is Cameron McCoy. And I was like, and my dad was like, hey, that's you. And I was like, what? So I stood up, and they were describing some guy, and I was just lit there like, our team never functioned the same when he was gone. This guy brought this type of light to our team, this element of leadership. And I was like, man, that is really cool. And I didn't know who they were giving to. So I was like, I missed 4 games. And they said we could not function when he left. And it was then at that moment I was like, there's something very different about me, and I can't mess my life up. And so I just was like, okay, listen, observe, try your best to be humble. My parents are not humble, but I tried my best to do it. But I think one thing is that I was always coachable. And that has gotten me through so much. Just when people gave me criticism, I didn't cry about it. I just like, okay, there's a reason they're saying that. And sometimes it was targeted, right? They're trying to get a reaction, but I tried to remain as teachable as possible. And I think that's been the biggest thing that has helped me, is just remaining teachable. And that's it. And there are other qualities I do have, but you asked for one.
Oh, 11 years old.
Yeah. And I was 11. And that was when it clicked. I'm like, there is something different about me, because people keep saying these things. There are people reaching out to me that normally doesn't happen. And I've seen that even as as an adult, where I've gotten breaks and sometimes not gotten breaks. Trust me. For every success, trust me, I've had like 30 failures. And the most difficult thing is just getting back up off the mat and saying, okay, let's go back at it again. Like, that is really hard. But I'm like, you're going through this for a reason. Yes.
So you mentioned that story about your principal. Were there any other instances where like you felt like in your education system, especially in elementary, like the early years, where like other teachers have like influenced you, or did you feel like there needed to be more like compassion and love from your teachers, like to help you better succeed? Because I know like you mentioned that like it can be hard, the education system, and sometimes especially in communities with low SES.
So where I went to school, all Caucasian teachers were not interested in black kids. So I scored really high on things, but they would kick me out of the class with any Jewish, Asian, or white kids. So they're like, no. And it was all, literally, there were never any black kids. In Ms. Grady's class, I'll never forget, because her class was the top class. And I remember her arguing on my part. She was like, no, Cameron scored well. He's supposed to be in my class. And they're like, no, we're moving him to Ms. Kennedy's class. Then I got moved from Ms. Kennedy's class because I had an attitude to the resource center with kids who were in there trying to learn English. So they're like, get him out of every single class. And they put me in that. It took like a month. Finally, my dad, I was telling him what I was doing. He was like, why do they have you doing that? I'm like, I don't know. And he finally went to the school and was like, you'll move my son. If you need to test him as many times as you want. And I remember taking about 7 tests, aptitude tests, and scoring extremely high. And they're like, fine, okay, we need to put him in these classes. Fine. I mean, but my father had to go to the school to physically do that. And they just kept testing me over and over and over and over. I mean, I was blessed enough to score very high on them. But, that was the only way it happened. But they did not want to deal with black students. And again, attitudes and perceptions, right? They'd only had negative experiences with black students. Like, they wouldn't even let us, their school buses, I don't know if you all rode on them or not, but they're yellow with black. No, I'm just teasing. Like, it was so bad. It was so bad. You would have these patrols. They used to get this thing where you could be a patrol on the bus, or before, like, a kid would be a patrol. I don't see them anymore. That was a huge, huge deal, like, for a student to get. And I never saw a black kid ever as one. I asked to be one, and the teacher was like, no, you're too immature. I mean, I just remember just being shut down all the time, and only white kids got to be there. So that was one thing. But by the time I got to high school, I'll say junior high, middle school, like I started seeing black teachers. It was the first time I saw black teachers, and they were smart, and they were the best teachers. Many of them, not all, but many of them were the best teachers, and that was when I started, people recognized, hey, this guy has some talent. And then when I got to high school, it was just great. I had an older sister who, I'm not kidding you, like the charm and good looks, that was her. This girl went to homecoming all 4 years, prom all 4 years, student body president. I mean, so I'm the little brother coming in there. I mean, cast a big shadow. So people just assumed because my sister was a high achiever that I would be the same. But it took that, right? It took an advocate, a legacy to be established before that could happen for me. Yes?
Do you feel there's pressure? Does your family still live in Washington, D.C.?
They moved to Baltimore when I left home.
Okay. Well, I just was wondering, do you feel like a weight of responsibility to give back to your old neighborhood, to those people that maybe are still in SES situations or low SES situations?
No, I do not feel a weight to give back. the responsibility that I feel is to be the best representative I can be with what I've gained. That's the weight I feel. With that, that becomes a byproduct, right? I'm not into education, so it's very difficult for me to go and, monitor or even enact any legislative change. And so the biggest thing that I've seen, and this may sound kind of shallow, is seriously become a multimillionaire. Like if I became a multimillionaire, then I could do that. But just coming in there with a PhD behind me and trying to change the way a school's perceived, no. Because infrastructurally, those things would have to change first. The best example, LeBron James, right? He just opened a school. What is he? A multimillionaire. And he has resources, and that is the only way it's going to change.
So then, is there anything that you would suggest for us as BYU students in Provo, Utah? Like, what are ways specifically that we could help? I mean, I don't have the resources or the time to up and move to Chicago. I'd love to, but like,
Great city.
is there any like
It
suggestions?
really is. One of my top 5.
Yeah, good. I mean, what could we possibly do at this point in our lives and in this situation?
I don't know. I really don't. I don't have the answer to it. And I don't know what it is specifically you want to accomplish. So I'd have to know that first. Just because you're going in to offer help doesn't mean they want your help. I think that's something to be keenly aware of. A lot of times people are not. But I would start with this. Just changing your attitude and those around you. Like when you hear people speak a specific way, correct them. It will change their perception of places and individuals. You all know this very well. Don't people have a certain attitude about Utah and BYU? Don't they have a specific perception, right? So how do you all go about changing that for them versus just shutting them out saying, well, they don't know anything because they're not this or they're not that, so of course they can't understand my community. So I would look at it from that standpoint first, where someone comes in to be critical. How are you creating or inviting, making it a welcoming environment, right? So I say that a lot of times about places. BYU, yeah, it's a safe place. I don't know how welcoming it is. And there's a difference between safe and welcoming, right? My neighborhood is not safe at all, but they will welcome you. They will bring you in with open arms. It's just not that safe, but you will be welcomed. They'll give you the shirt off their back and they don't have anything. But this environment, yeah, it's safe, but is it welcoming? Do I feel that I'm part of the fabric? I'm integrated in the fabric of this community? And I think if you start from there, you might find your answer, but I don't know specifically. I don't have that answer. Maybe if I got paid, triple or something, and I had the resources, I could start finding those things. I could. Yes.
Well, how do we talked about this a little bit in class about colorblindness, and I'm just curious of how we kind of balance this where I don't want to be blind to diversity and race, but I also don't want to have be the first thing I notice. I have to talk about this person because they're different than me, and I have to make them know that I noticed this, and just this confusion of, I don't know, I want them to know that I'm aware of it, and I'm aware that they're different than me, and that's hard for them, but I don't want it to be overwhelming.
Why do you feel they need to be aware of anything?
I guess be aware that if someone lives in a different area, they have their life is hard in their own way, and I'm not just expecting that they have the exact same experiences as me, like we talked about exactly in class. But I guess just not being. Sorry, I can't think of what I say.
So let me ask you a question. Let's say you all come from pretty wealthy families. Do I walk in and say, oh my goodness, you are so rich. I need to make sure that I let you know that I'm aware how rich you are, just so you feel comfortable.
Right.
Just treat me like a human being. That's it. I mean, I should be smart enough to understand what you're here for, right?
Yeah, I guess it's in race conversations of just not everyone has my exact same opinions, and and like how do you be sensitive with that, but.
Okay.
No.
Okay. Wait.
Sorry,
Oh. All right. I think I understand where you're coming from. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to try to address it. I don't know if I'll have the answer, but I think I'll try to address it for you. So, what's your name?
Alyssa.
Okay. So, Alyssa, we go to a place and, I may never have been there, or you have a minority friend, you go with her, the three of us go, and you literally just walk into this place freely, right? And me and your friends stop. We're like, you realize we've never been in this type of building before. Like being aware, like, oh, I need to be aware that Cameron and the other Alyssa can't walk through this same door with me. I think being aware of those things, like when I say, listen, I didn't have the same opportunity as you. Like just being sensitive to that, and not necessarily sensitive, but being empathetic, like just knowing, I've been in a situation where I wasn't allowed to do this, so I need to understand it from that standpoint. And I'm sure in many of your lives, you're accustomed to being around college graduates. When I go home, my parents are raving, like, our son's a doctor. It is a huge deal. But when I go to your neighborhood, it doesn't mean anything. I can walk to a rich neighborhood right up the hill. It means nothing that I have a PhD. Nothing. Right? Absolutely nothing. So again, different rules for different places, right? And no matter what, you'll be accepted first. If we went somewhere, you get accepted first. You get to drive at 10:30 p.m. at night and not worry about a cop pulling you over, and that may be the last time you see your family. I came home from a conference in January. My flight was delayed. It was supposed to get in at 8 p.m. I was like, all right, sunlight still. Got delayed by 4 hours. I was on the road at 1 a.m. coming from Salt Lake City Airport back to Provo. I was so scared. And I was sick too. It's like, if I get pulled over, I have no idea what will happen next. Do you ever have that fear when you get in a car at night? No, you don't even think about it. So that's what I think you're getting at, like just being aware of those types of differences. So if someone does ask you something who's from a minority population to do something, you don't have to be like, wait, what? Okay, I completely understand why you're asking me to do this for you.
Just like getting to that point of maybe just knowing I will not understand at every level, and that's
Yes,
okay.
yeah, it's okay.
Yeah, okay.
We don't expect you to. Typically when in my neighborhood, like if someone white comes in or something and they don't know something, typically we just make fun of them for a second and we're like, okay, look, this is what you need to say. And they're like, oh, okay. And it's nothing offensive. It's just like, oh, you knew she was going to say that, or we knew he would say that. So like I said, typically in black neighborhoods, like we embrace, I've always seen it this way. Again, I can't speak for every single one, but in my neighborhood, typically if someone came in who was white, we did everything to protect them because we knew they didn't know the rules. So we're trying to educate them as quickly as possible. And if someone comes in and they know the rules, it's even better because then we're looking at them to help us.
So I've had some black friends
How long is this
on
class?
university and stuff.
I have two.
Oh, okay.
We'll wrap up in maybe about 5 minutes.
Okay.
If you-
I didn't know if I was going over time or anything. I'm sorry.
Anyway, so I just have some black friends, and then they've talked about like the staring that they get and as a minority on campus or in white places. And so sometimes I feel awkward just walking around campus and I'm like, hey, how you doing? And then it's just like, they're like looking at the ground and I'm like, I'm not like I wasn't staring at you, but I just wanted to say hi, and now I'm just a super weird white person that's also staring at you. And I just feel like I just always feel bad, because I'm like, I wasn't staring at, I was trying to treat you like a normal person, but then it just got awkward, and now I'm just second guessing everything that I just did. And then it's just like that distance becomes more created in a sense, because then the next time I'm walking past someone and they're a minority and I'm not waving at them because I'm like, we make eye contact, but then I don't say hi. Does that make sense? In those scenarios, and because I'm trying not to be the person that's like, oh, they're just watching me because I'm a minority.
First, I would say don't force it. And if you find where it's awkward and they're just kind of like that, take a second, like, look, I'm taking a class right now, and I don't know a whole lot. I mean, I really would just make it very easy for myself. I was like, taking a class right now, I'm trying to learn things that I've never heard of before. And so I'm really just trying to be aware of people and not make anyone feel as if they're invisible, right? And I mean, I literally would just approach it that way. I'm taking a class, learning a lot of stuff. You know, I know you may not have all the answers, but I just want to be friendly. I want to let you know, not invisible or something to that effect. I think it always breaks the ice because when you can just demonstrate your own ignorance, right, then the person's like, okay, fair enough. They think it's a really good icebreaker.
Thank you everybody for your questions. Let's get Cameron in.
All right.